Hello and welcome to Destination Draft Day. Nick Durst, Michael Rockman back as usual, but we are also joined by Joe Volpe, the fantasy football expert across all of the land. Joe, how are you doing today?
Good. How you doing?
Doing perfectly fine. We are going to be talking about all things fantasy football, but mostly with a little bit of rookie focus, talking about some of the guys in the 2021 NFL draft class that are now going to be having impacts. You know, guys like Justin Jefferson, James Robinson could have easily won you a league last year, and now we're trying to find those guys that are going to be doing similar things. But first and foremost, we got to get down to what's really important, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars have signed Tim Tebow, the tight end convert, now going to be coming in, playing with his former college coach, Urban Meyer. Nick, I'd love to get your thoughts on this move and really what you think about Tim Tebow's potential in the NFL.
Tebow time. I think he's a must grab for the fantasy leagues because how many rushing touchdowns is Tim Tebow going to have out of the tight end position? I'll think a lot. Good guy, veteran leadership. But I guess we got to ask the question, does he actually make the team? We got to see. I think he would. He's not going to start. We know he's not going to be returning kicks or anything on the kick return team. Maybe I'll be in there like he was with the Jets when they rooted to on the punts. I'm excited, though. I tell you this, number 15 is allowed to be worn by tight ends this year, I think, right? So those 15 Tebow jerseys will be flying off the shelves. The Jaguars can't print them quick enough. And I think Tim Tebow will outsell Trevor Lawrence in jerseys this season.
It's a bold prediction. Joe, obviously, from a fantasy perspective, any deep leagues where, maybe like 50 players deep or something that you're looking into Tim Tebow as a potential late round grab?
He's 33 years old right now. So, and like Nick said, if he even makes the team, then at that point, what kind of role is he going to have? I think it's going to be a nice story. And I'm sure throughout the year, maybe he'll catch a touchdown or something like that. Or like Nick said, maybe even run it in. But unless
he'll be lining up a fullback a lot, I would think.
He could, yeah. I would imagine so because they don't really have a fullback right now. Not a lot of teams even use that position anymore. But yeah, I mean, Tebow's a do-it-all type tight end / quarterback / fullback / running back. So
right. I mean, they're gonna use the Taysom Hill model. I mean, he will throw the ball.
It's possible,
right? So Hill's starts at tight end, right? He has tight end eligibility in fantasy football. I think it's gonna work out in this sense, but Urban Meyer owes a lot of his career to Tim Tebow and his success. So, Urban Meyer is not the head coach of the Jaguars if Tim Tebow wasn't, this amazing college football player. And, Michael, you and Joe, I guess you guys are young. Tim Tebow maybe sparked your love for college football because he was just that, newsworthy and buzzworthy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, Taysom Hill did have tight end eligibility last year. Until he ended up being the starting quarterback. Then the week after that, they kind of took that away. Right. So it's going to be interesting to see how they label Tebow because a lot of times these guys are wide receivers / tight end / running back / whatever. But yeah, unless you're in a dynasty league and you got a couple extra spots that you don't mind burning, I wouldn't really be looking at them.
Yeah, we got Tebow number 15 and Trevor Lawrence number 16. So there's going to be a photo shoot there, right? With 15 and 16.
Well, that raises an interesting question because 15 is currently occupied by quarterback Gardner Minshew. And I wanted to ask, do you think that, even though Tebow isn't listed as a QB, could this potentially increase the odds that they're looking to move Minshew and get some capital out of him? They have Jake Luton, who decided to
Luton was good. Luton
show some impressive stuff during his rookie year. Maybe they don't want to depend entirely on him as their backup QB, but there are some veterans on the market. Could we see a, gadget QB type almost push the needle to where they're willing to deal Gardner Minshew, or do you think they're going to love his backup availability?
For me, I don't think Tebow really moves the needle that much. I don't think Tebow's like, okay, now that we have Tebow, we can finally trade Gardner Minshew. I feel like a Gardner Minshew trade has been in the talks for some time now, and another team's probably willing to take on Minshew as a potential backup quarterback with some upside in that first year of all the rookies, he had the highest quarterback rating of any of the rookies in 2019 rather. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely upside with a guy like Minshew, and if they can get some compensation for him, I'm sure they'll do it. But I don't think Tebow was like the selling point of like, oh, okay, now we have to trade Minshew. Like, I don't think he moves the needle that much.
I don't think it's a good move to trade Minshew, but if I was a team who is not sure about the health of my quarterback, someone who particularly would get injured each season, then I'd love to have Minshew as my backup.
For sure. And, you know, as much as we'd love to sit here and talk about Tebow, we do got to get the show rolling. So we're going to first talk about the quarterback position. Joe, I'd love to get your thoughts. Obviously, you got the guys that are most likely going to be the immediate starters, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson. But then there's those other options. You know, Justin Fields seems like he could potentially work his way into the rotation early. Trey Lance, Mac Jones maybe have a little bit more of a backseat and hill to overcome, but still plenty of upside there. If you're looking at it from a standard perspective, you know, whether it's PPR or whatever, just what type of value would you put on these rookie QBs in their first year? And then from a dynasty perspective, long-term look at these guys, what do you think of, you know, maybe someone like a Trey Lance who gets to work with a Kyle Shanahan, and what kind of value do you put on these players?
Yeah, so I'm a huge advocate for Trey Lance. He was one of my favorite quarterbacks in the draft. The landing spot in San Francisco is great for him. It's just about when, like you said, when he takes over that starting role. And you know, a lot of times, most of the rookie quarterbacks that are in the first round typically see 5 or 6 games at least throughout their first year. I don't think that's going to be the case with Mac Jones because I think that situation is a little different. I don't think it was Belichick trading up for a guy they really wanted. Apparently, they were also targeting Elijah Vera Tucker before the Jets traded up and, you know, sniped that away from them. But overall, I think Trey Lance, first of all, when you're drafting at the end of like the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th round, and let's say you're going for a backup quarterback or it's a 2 QB league. If you're looking for guys like us with upside, Derek Carr is there, like Daniel Jones, like not a lot of guys who I would really be excited about drafting. But Trey Lance, when he does become the starter, he's a guy who has top 10 quarterback potential. So if you want to rely on him from the get-go, Trey Lance and Justin Fields are probably not guys you want to target as your first quarterback taken. But at the same time, if you're drafting a backup, might as well get someone with upside because bye weeks usually don't happen until, I mean, last year was a little earlier, but probably won't see.
Well, this year we get 2 bye weeks per team. So.
Is it 2 bye weeks? I know there's 17 games, but I saw there was only 1 bye week.
I think it's an 18-week season and 2 bye weeks, I thought, but the schedule's not out yet. So
the schedule's not out, but they're doing 17 regular season games and then the 1 bye week for 18 weeks. So they're just adding another game of strain on all these players. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to draft a quarterback late, especially a backup, you want a guy with upside. You want a guy for if your quarterback has a bye week 7, Trey Lance is probably going to be starting at that point. So he's the ideal pick in that area.
How about, and this isn't a rookie, Joe, but we get to August, you know, you got to do your draft. Aaron Rodgers says he's going to hold out. Do you draft Jordan Love? And do you pass on Aaron Rodgers if he's sitting there for you?
Well, I mean, if he is holding out, then ideally you got to avoid Rodgers. But I think it also kind of goes to the point where if we don't know Rodgers' situation in late August and his ADP has fallen into like the 13th, 12th, 11th, you know, like those later rounds, it goes to what I was saying about Trey Lance of like, okay, if you're going to take a second quarterback late, you want a guy with upside. If you can get Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers in the 13th round as your backup quarterback, I'd take that. You know, worst case, it doesn't work out. There's always a ton of quarterbacks on waivers that are available. So I have no problem taking one of those guys late and hoping that they're at least on the field by the time the primary quarterback is by. And if not, you just pick up one off waivers.
Absolutely. And, you know, we talk about the 2021 rookies, but also a lot of eyes are going to be on the 2020 class, looking at guys like Joe Burrow, who now have added weapons, added some offensive line protection, and looking at guys like Justin Herbert, who really just set the league on fire with an incredible rookie year. Do you expect similar production from Herbert, or do you think that there's going to be a bit of a drop-off and you'd kind of avoid the hype that's surrounding him right now?
There's no evidence to me that points to a drop off other than, nerves or just something that you can't really calculate. Sometimes guys just have down years. It happens. But the offensive line has improved for Herbert. They got Rashawn Slater in the first round. As far as weapons, he lost Hunter Henry. They did gain some later round guys in the draft, Trey McKitty and Josh Palmer. They added Jared Cook as a potential weapon. Keenan Allen's still there. Still got Austin Eckler in the backfield. So I have no issue drafting Justin Herbert early with the notion that he can be that top 5 potential quarterback, especially if he does take a leap forward. Because last year in his first game, he was just kind of thrown into the mix when Tyrod Taylor had that punctured lung by the doctor. So, I'm all over Justin Herbert. I think he's going to be great. And in terms of Joe Burrow, you're right. I mean, he's got a primary wide receiver 1, Jamar Chase. He's got T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, one of my favorites in that backfield. They upgraded the offensive line. So it's looking good for Burrow, too. It's just about if he's going to be able to stay on the field with that torn ACL from last year.
So just a hypothetical draft situation. If you were looking in the, let's say, later rounds and you have Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, which one do you think, how would you rank those 3 in terms of which you'd prefer to bring in onto your fantasy lineup for immediate impact?
I would have, it's tough. I'd rather have Joe Burrow first because I like what we saw in his rookie year at times. And now he's got upgraded weapons, upgraded offensive line. I'll put Trevor Lawrence second on that list. And I'm going to put Zach Wilson third only because as a prospect, I feel like the comparisons for Zach Wilson were Patrick Mahomes or Mitchell Trubisky. Like a lot of people felt like he was a mix between those 2 guys. And at times he showed flashes of both of those guys. So, being a Jet system, I want to see how he acclimates to the NFL. They got the West Coast offense with Mike LaFleur in New York. So it's very similar to what he ran at BYU. So I'm not too concerned about the transition. But at the same time, it's just going to be about getting his footing. Going from college speed to NFL speed is a big step for a lot of guys. So Trevor Lawrence is not a guy who I'm worried about stuff like that. He's been a winner his whole life. He hasn't lost a single regular season game his entire career. So Trevor Lawrence is not someone I'm worried about in that aspect, but Zach Wilson is.
And, one interesting thing that we've kind of seen consistently in terms of fantasy rankings is a rookie QB comes in and the hype really gets building for maybe their best wide receiver on the team. And they say, oh, this is absolutely going to happen. Would you say that that's a better approach, or would you say that it's better to sort of avoid the wide receivers for young QBs that maybe are going to be handing off a lot or trying to get just simple game plans? Because we've seen it with guys like Tua, where maybe there's plenty of potential for Tua in year 2, but at the same time, the game plan was severely limited. A lot of short passes, a lot of just trying to keep things simple for him. Do you think it's better to, embrace the new QB is going to be better, or do you think it's better to kind of wait on the QB to grow and avoid overdrafting the position?
For me, that's like a situational type deal, because if you have like Devontae Adams and you're a rookie quarterback, you're like, okay, my priority is I'm going to get the ball to the best guy in the field, and that's going to be Adams. Last year, just for example, for Tua, he had Devontae Parker, which, it's still kind of up in the air about if he's good or if he's bad. He's had some good years, had some bad years. Mike Gesicki, who was banged up at times. He lost 2 of his wide receivers to opting out for the season. He didn't have a great offensive line, so he didn't really have that go-to guy. That's why Myles Gaskin was also used in a bigger role as well. So I think it's very situational. I wouldn't just blanket all rookie quarterbacks, avoid all rookie quarterbacks, wide receivers or something like that. For me, it's too situational.
I got you. And, talking about those wide receivers, there were some excellent wide receivers that have been added in this class. Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase immediately as those top 3, but also guys like Rashad Bateman later on, Terrace Marshall in Carolina. There's plenty of options around the league that are going to be intriguing when it comes to guys to add. In terms of that top 3, how would you rank them in terms of fantasy football? Just what do you think they'll produce in year 1? And then maybe some potential sleepers that you think could be late round guys that actually are quite good contributors for the fantasy leagues around there.
Yeah, so if we're talking wide receivers, I'll say top 3, Jamar Chase has got to be that one, reunited with Joe Burrow. I think they're going to hit it off immediately. I'm not going to say like a Justin Jefferson type rookie season. I don't think it's going to be in close to that, but there's definitely potential. Jamar Chase's upside does reach that type of level. Number 2, it's going to be tough. I don't really know if I trust Waddle. He's going to be playing mainly in the slot. I know you can use him elsewhere, but that's kind of where Mike Gesicki sat a lot in his career, and he seemed to be too his guy. Then you have Will Fuller, Devontae Parker on the outside. So I'm just worried about consistent targets, especially with Myles Gaskin catching a ton out of the backfield too. Rashad Bateman, one of my favorite wide receivers in the class, falling to Baltimore, not ideal for fantasy when you have Lamar Jackson as a passer, who is a little underrated as a passer as a whole. But when it comes to how they run their offense, it's just, he's not going to be in a spot to get a ton of targets. So first, I would say Chase. I guess you got to follow it up with another guy, Devontae Smith, who I love. I love Devontae Smith, the Slim Reaper. I'm not too scared of his weight. Being 166 pounds is really scary from the outside, but if you see the way this guy moves, it's not a typical fast like Henry Ruggs, not a polished receiver, or like Brashad Perryman or any of these guys, John Ross. He's not that type of player. He's an alpha. He is a beast, and he won that Heisman for a reason. So Devontae Smith is going to be second, and Jalen Waddle is probably going to be my third just because utility-wise. Some sleepers, Terrace Marshall, you mentioned him. I love that fit back with Joe Brady in Carolina. I think they're going to end up playing DJ Moore in the slot, and I think Terrace Marshall is going to have some good opportunity in the outside. On top of that, Amari Rodgers in Green Bay, potentially being that slot receiver there for Aaron Rodgers. He hasn't had a good slot receiver since Randall Cobb. And if he does end up playing, he might end up utilizing him a good amount.
How about, you mentioned John Ross. How about his teammate, Kadarius Toney? I know Michael kind of talked me into liking the pick, even though I don't think they needed a receiver. But there could be some targets there, despite the fact that it's a really crowded, wide receiver, tight end, running back room there for the Giants offense.
There's a couple guys in this rookie class I do not like, and Kadarius Toney is one of them. I am not a huge fan. I do another show with a buddy of mine, Faraz, called the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast, and we had Matt Harmon on. If you're familiar with him, he works for Yahoo Sports. He does this reception perception where he watches every single route, every single wide receiver runs, and marks their success against man coverage and zone and stuff like that. So he marked Kadarius Toney as being one of the worst route runners in this upcoming class, and that's not something that you want to be a part of. That's not something you want to buy into. You got Kenny Golladay in New York. You got Saquon Barkley out of that backfield, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram. There's a lot of guys who can take targets away from Toney. It's with every guy has a value, right? If Kadarius Toney is going to be there in that 10th, 11th, 12th round, then I think it's worth taking a shot. But if he's going to be going in that 5th, 6th, 7th round, I'm going to be staying far away.
Well, the thing with Toney is, he's getting a target. Shepard, you can mark him down right now for 5 games on the injured list. You could mark down Galladay for 5 games. You don't know what's going to happen with Shepard. Ingram's going to get targets, but if he can't catch the ball, it doesn't really mean anything there. That's why Ingram's one of the worst tight ends in fantasy football. But, Michael, how do you think Kadarius Toney is going to fit in here with the Giants' attack here? And, is he going to have trouble even getting targeted?
I think that he is definitely a work in progress. So in year one, if you're just doing a standard redraft league, I'd probably try to avoid for the most part, unless, like Joe said, that it's late round value that you're just kind of swinging for the fences on. But ultimately, I do think that there's plenty of potential. He has great contact balance. He has the separation ability. It's just big on, can you capitalize on the route running itself? He's going to get a lot of manufactured touches, which I think with his playmaking ability, he'll be able to contribute with. But at the same time, it's still something that he is working on as becoming really just a polished wide receiver. And we saw a huge jump from his 3rd to 4th year at Florida, but there's still a lot of work to do. And jumping from the SEC to the NFL is still quite the jump. So Toney will have his issues. He'll have his games where really you're kind of just wondering where he was at the entire time. But I think there could be some pop-off performances to where if you can play it right, he's a great depth guy to have, but playing it right in fantasy is one of the riskiest things that you can try to do because a lot of times it does not work out.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a good waiver pickup. I'll say that. I think at times, like Nick says, if there's a couple guys injured and he's sitting on waivers, he might be the priority pick that week, and he might have some value there. But he's not a guy I'm going to be targeting necessarily in redraft.
Now, his teammate was the consensus #1 pick last year in fantasy, Saquon Barkley, coming off a pretty gruesome injury. Don't know how he's going to rebound. Is he going to come back like Adrian Peterson with MVP? We could hope. And again, Jones really hasn't played much with him. They've played maybe like 6-7 games together, so you don't know what Jones's thoughts are going to be there. Where are you looking here with Saquon Barkley as far as if you were going to draft him, and where is it worth taking the risk?
So obviously with any, especially running backs coming off a torn ACL, they are prone to more soft tissue injuries that following year, like hamstring strains, stuff like that. So there is built-in caution with Barkley. Because of that, I wouldn't put him in that top 3 to 4 range. But if we're talking mid to late first round, I think Barkley is still a guy I'm heavily buying into. He's going to be the clear workhorse in that backfield. He's going to see a ton of targets. In the one game he played last year, he had 9 targets. Second game, he got knocked out a little early, obviously. But yeah, I mean, as a whole, Saquon Barkley's still a fantastic running back. And even if there's a guy who come back from an injury, it's going to be Barkley. And that 2 years ago when he had that high ankle sprain, I think he only missed like 2 weeks.
Right.
And then he played the rest of the year. How well he performed or not, he's going to be on the field if he can, and he's a baller, and he's an athletic monster. So if I had to put money on anybody coming off a torn ACL and having a good year, it's going to be Barkley. But the fact that you don't have to take him in that top 3 range, I think, is what works best for him.
So Michael over here absolutely nailed the Steelers draft pick. He was on it for weeks. He knew they were taking Najee Harris. ETN going to the Jaguars. Good for Trevor Lawrence because he's got his buddy, but kind of questionable because Jaguars are pretty good at running back. Rookie running backs here, Joe. What are you thinking here? I don't think Najee Harris is going to be a huge fantasy running back in his rookie season. I think that's just not the Steelers' game plan towards the red zone. So I don't really know how many touchdowns he's going to get for you. And he's not really Michael, he does catch some passes, but wasn't asked to do that much because we still got the receivers he's with at Alabama. So to me, I wouldn't target him as my top rookie running back. But who do you like out of this draft class from the running backs?
I love Najee. I love Najee Harris, and I think when it comes to running backs in fantasy, sometimes you just got to follow the volume. I mean, the Steelers' offensive line isn't great right now. But one thing Mike Tomlin has always wanted to do is run with a bell cow running back. Last year, he touted James Conner as being their bell cow guy. But you know what? When you don't have a great offensive system and you don't have great personnel in that backfield, you kind of have to switch some guys around, and that's what happened. That's why with Steelers, with all the needs they have, offensive line especially, I really thought they were going to address the offensive line. Right. But they chose to go running back. And Mike Tomlin is just tired of not having his guy back there. So I think Harris, he may not be this prolific pass catcher, especially when you do have Juju back. You have Deontay Johnson. You have Chase Claypool. But I think Harris is going to get his workload. And I think that alone is going to be enough for him to be a low-end type running back 1. And on top of that, they brought in Matt Canada. So a new offensive coordinator, new scheme. One of the things the Steelers did not do well over the last couple of years was play action. And a large part of that was because they had no running game. You can't sell the run if you don't have a running game. So Najee Harris, I think he's definitely going to help them out in that aspect, which is also going to help out Chase Claypool. And, we can save that for another time. But yeah, Harris is someone I love. And Travis Etienne. I know a lot of people are not a fan of this pick. And when I first looked at it from the outside, I really wasn't either. But one crucial thing that Urban Meyer said, and this was in a video interview, is that he was devastated to miss out on Kadarius Toney. Devastated. And if you think about Kadarius Toney, you think of that gadget guy. You think of that Percy Harvin role that Urban Meyer loved to utilize in Ohio State, whether it was Percy Harvin, Curtis Samuel, whoever it was. Now that historically has been a wide receiver. But Travis Etienne is more than just a running back. Travis Etienne is the best pass-catching running back in this class. I truly think Travis Etienne is going to be that Percy Harvin type guy for Urban Meyer. And not only that, but the continuity with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, he's your golden boy. If the golden boy says he wants his running back, you give the golden boy what he wants. So, he's the reason Urban Meyer decided to go into the NFL. Trevor Lawrence is the reason that Urban Meyer decided to be an NFL coach. So, yeah, I think Travis Etienne is going to be fine. I think he's going to be heavily utilized both as a rusher and a receiver, especially because there's not like an established wide receiver one in Jacksonville. We thought DJ Chark was kind of going to be that guy. Marvin Jones is in his 30s at this point. Laviska Shenault, who a lot of people thought was going to be that Percy Harvin type guy, he's part of that old regime. They don't have any ties to him. And that's the same story with James Robinson. They just don't have any ties to an undrafted free agent who filled in and did his job last year. So, I'm a fan of Travis Etienne. I'm a fan of Najee Harris. Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon after this year is going to be free agent. Williams was one of my favorite running backs in this class. So if you're in Dynasty, Williams is someone I'm heavily targeting. After this year, he's got running back one potential. So all over those guys.
Michael, obviously you had Michael Carter as your sixth-ranked running back coming into the draft. This guy is in a tremendous spot. He went to the Jets. They're not going to, turn the ball over to Wilson. He'll let him throw like crazy. And I think he's going to be the starter week one. What do you expect, Michael, from Carter this season with the Jets?
Yeah, with Michael Carter and Tevin Coleman in that backfield, the Jets seem to have a pretty good running back room, really. And I know that a lot of questions fall on this offensive line, but with Elijah Vera Tucker now there, Mekhi Becton in year two, George Fant actually looked pretty solid at the right tackle spot. There's some consistency on this line that I think is going to play in pretty well for this offensive line as a whole. We saw what the San Francisco running back room looks like, so I'm kind of worried about Michael Carter from week to week. But I think in terms of his overall availability, his overall dependability as a runner, I think he's going to be able to produce. And if you're looking for a rookie running back to really step up and make some great games happen, Carter is definitely one of the better options. I think the frame is definitely a question mark, but in terms of receiving ability and just overall patience as a runner, he offers plenty of it. Another guy that was just above him in my rankings, Dokes out of Cincinnati, heads to Miami in the 7th round. And if you're looking for that guy that kind of pops off out of nowhere, I think it's absolutely Dokes. I think Myles Gaskin did a fine job as a running back. I don't think that this is necessarily a shot at Gaskin, but I do think that if you're looking for a guy that kind of pops off out of nowhere, Miami is a great setup because of how much they're going to try to depend on the run to kind of take that pressure off Tua, how much that running back room is still unsettled in terms of just who's going to be this main workhorse back. And really, Dokes kind of fits that aggressive run style that Flores and many of this coaching staff got to see with guys like LeGarrette Blount and many other running backs in the New England system. Look for Dokes to potentially surprise and be a great pick if you're looking for a guy in that 15th round. And I'm telling you, last round, easy value because no one's really looking for this guy. Look for Dokes to be that great steal that could potentially be a huge value pick later on whenever you're looking at it in hindsight.
Michael, what about Kenneth Gainwell? I know you had him as your 4th running back.
Yeah, Gainwell's an interesting situation because I love the receiving upside. Joe said that Etienne's probably the best receiving back in this class. I think Gainwell is probably the only guy that really could make that case to go against him. Personally, for me, I'm Gainwell over Etienne as a receiver, Etienne over Gainwell as a runner, but it's really neck and neck. It's such a great class for the receiving ability from those two. But I don't love the situation in terms of what he's going to be going into. I think we could see some 2 running back looks where Hurts has both guys in the backfield because it's great to have 2 guys that are excellent weapons in the backfield, and the receiving room in Philadelphia isn't necessarily something that's going to be knocking everyone around in terms of air yards. So maybe Gainwell gets a lot of touches or moves out to the slot on plenty of snaps, but I don't love his overall rushing upside, at least in year one. Miles Sanders, a very talented back. As long as he stays healthy, he should mostly control that backfield. So it's just one of those things. I liked his talent. I liked his skill set, but overall, the biggest thing for fantasy production is just volume, and I don't know how much volume Gainwell is going to get.
Right. I will add on Gainwell, though. Nick Sirianni had a press conference talking about, just the draft in general. And one of the things he mentioned about Gainwell is he compared, one of the reporters compared him to Nyheim Hines. And one of the things Sirianni said was, yeah, I could see that, and that's pretty similar to how we want to use him in this backfield. When you look at what Miles Sanders did last year, as a rusher, he was fantastic. 5.3 yards per carry, very effective as, on the ground, even with the depleted offensive line. As a pass catcher, Miles Sanders had 8 drops on 52 targets. So he wasn't exactly this, beaming receiver for them last year. Hence why they pick off a guy like Kerryon Johnson off waivers, why they draft like one of the best, in your opinion, best pass catching running backs in this draft. So I think Miles Sanders is going to keep his ground role, but there might be room for a second guy to have some value in this backfield, especially receiving. I mean, there's a calculation done that a receiving a target is worth 1.3 times as much as any kind of type of rush. So,
Joe, who is this year's Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the sense that he's very overhyped? Everyone's like, oh, great spot. Got to pick this guy right away. Ends up getting replaced by Le'Veon Bell and really doesn't do what you expected.
Trey Sermon. I'm not a fan of Trey Sermon.
Neither is Michael. He has him as the 10th best rookie running back.
Michael, I think we had the same rankings. I had Kenneth Gainwell 4th. I had Michael Carter 6th. I think we might have had the same exact rankings here. He is so overrated as a rusher. I mean, if you watch his film, this guy could not hit an open hole. There are so many times when I'm looking at him like, it's right there. Like, if I was Trey Sermon in that scenario, I could have just moved a little to the right and taken it to the house. He does not have that top end speed. He's pass catch capable, but he's more of a short yardage type guy. Everybody's talking about this 3rd round draft capital. Like, if the Jets had a 3rd round pick, they would have picked Carter in the 3rd round. I don't think this is a huge plus for Trey Sermon in a backfield with him, Raheem Mostert, Wayne Gallman, Jeff Wilson. You have JaMychal Hasty from last year. You can't discount Kyle Juszczyk. What happened?
Wayne Gallman should get a lot of touches. He was very good with the Giants last year. I don't know why the Giants didn't bring him back.
There's so many guys in the San Francisco offense that have potential, and you can't even discount Kyle Juszczyk, who over the last couple years has had the most targets out of any of these 49ers backs. And you can't discount Trey Lance either, who had 1,000 rushing yards in his one big year. So he's going to be taken away in that aspect, take away some potential rushing touchdowns. I know there's the argument that after this year, Trey Sermon might just be like the only guy left in that running back depth chart. A lot of these guys are free agents. But that doesn't mean they're not going to have 3 undrafted free agents that are in the rotation, or that they're not going to draft another guy or whatever. So I'm not banking anything on Trey Sermon. I'm not a fan of him.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and we already said it a little bit, but the volume is the biggest thing that's going to play into a lot of the production, especially early on for these guys. You're trying to find guys that are going to steal touches. I don't see Sermon really establishing himself as this dominant back. I'm not going to be the guy that says it's not going to work out because I don't trust Shanahan. If Shanahan likes a running back, I'm going to assume he's going to have a couple games where he goes off. But that doesn't mean that he's going to be a full-time consistent player. And really, inconsistency in fantasy is one of the hardest things to overcome. I advise everyone, if you're looking for a running back, Sermon may have some games where he pops off and everyone can say, oh, it was a great pick. But I don't think he's going to be a season-long dependable player, and that's someone that you try to steer clear of when it comes to fantasy football.
And I like what you said, too, that Trey Sermon is not this overwhelmingly, great running back. Like, if he was some all-star running back, then I'd say, all right, maybe I'll buy into this 49ers backfield. Maybe I'll put some investment into, insert whoever that could have been. But Trey Sermon is just not that guy for me. He's not this overwhelming talent that's just going to demand volume. So, absolutely.
Now, moving on to tight ends here, Joe. Is there any rookie tight end worth drafting other than Kyle Pitts this season?
Next season, Eric Ebron is going to be a free agent, so there is potential for Pat Freiermuth to have future value. In terms of this season, Tommy Tremble out of Carolina, just because, that tight end room is kind of wide open. They do have Dan Arnold, who they picked up, but I'm not a huge fan of him. He had some drop issues. And then you look at Houston, you got Brevin Jordan, who was one of my favorite tight ends in this class. They ended up getting him late. As of right now, there's a ton of open targets in Houston. They let go of a couple of their tight ends, including Darren Fells. So there might be opportunity for a guy like Brevin Jordan to come in. In terms of drafting these guys, there's no one other than Kyle Pitts I'm really looking to draft in terms of this rookie tight end class, but I'm sure they'll have some waiver wire pickups throughout the year.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on that real quick. Tyrod Taylor, during his time in Buffalo, made Charles Clay a relevant fantasy tight end. And while I'm not dissing Charles Clay, I was a fan of him at the time. I think it's important to realize, if he's a starter full-time for Houston, or if they're going with guys like Ryan Finley and Davis Mills, who aren't really the most strong-arm QB, they're going to be throwing a lot down, check downs, tight ends, passes, stuff like that. Look for that tight end room in Houston to be a big part of contribution. And whether that's, Jordan Akins or
Jordan
Akins or I think they have Kahale Waring, and they also have Brevin Jordan. There's options, but if Brevin is able to step up and make an opportunity for himself, then I absolutely think that we could see some surprising potential out of him, because really I had him as my tight end too, and I still like the talent that's there. I do think there's question marks in terms of, he was an athletic tight end and didn't test as well as he probably should have, but still plenty of potential, plenty of receiving ability. If the Texans let him have an opportunity, they run either 2 tight end sets or he's able to work his way onto the field, we could see plenty of targets going to that tight end spot. And if Brevin Jordan's there, then he's going to catch the ball.
Absolutely.
Yeah. See what happens there. Joe, Rondale Moore or Elijah Moore? Who do you like better?
I'm talking long term. We're talking short term, because the answer to both is Elijah Moore. I love Elijah Moore. He was one of my favorite wide receivers in this class. He's going to lock down that slot position. I think Jamison Crowder is going to be a cap casualty in the coming days, or at least before the season starts. I'm not sure about the metrics on that and if they have to cut him before a certain date to get a certain amount. But as of now, I believe they can cut him and save $10 million, and they'd only have $1 million hit on dead cap. So Crowder is a guy who might be a cap casualty. Look, there's not like Corey Davis. He had that great year last year. That's awesome. He's going to be in the outside, likely with Denzel Mims. But there's no alpha proven wide receiver in New York. There's that chance that Elijah Moore becomes that guy. There's a world where Elijah Moore is the wide receiver 1 in New York. It's not impossible to do. I like Mims. I like Davis. I've been a fan of Davis since he was drafted. But as of right now, I think the upside for Moore is astronomical. So, especially with Zach Wilson, 2 rookies coming in together. A lot of times they build continuity with each other. Sometimes they room together, whatever it may be. But I'm a fan of Elijah Moore.
And some other wide receivers that landed in spots where you kind of talked about it, maybe not an established guy, Tylan Wallace in Baltimore, Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit. And then also, you kind of look around the league, maybe an Amir Smith-Marset in that wide receiver 3 spot in Minnesota. You can also look at Nico Collins down there in Houston. For these mid-round wide receivers, is there anyone that you're kind of looking at as a late-round pick that you think is going to be able to contribute in a way to where they're worth having on the roster?
Nico Collins, a guy you mentioned, bigger receiver. There's just a lot of, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of opportunity in Houston. If Watson does end up playing, Collins has a chance to be that wide receiver too. Brandon Cook's another guy who gets banged up a lot, so there's a chance Collins might be that wide receiver 1 in Houston by the time the season's done. So that's definitely something to buy into. Amon-Ra St. Brown, brother of Equanimus St. Brown in Green Bay. Amon-Ra's in Detroit. So there's just a wide open wide receiver room. They waited until the beginning of the 4th round to even address that position. They took 2 defensive tackles, 2 good defensive tackles, but they took 2 defensive tackles before addressing the wide receiver position in the draft. Amon-Ra, he had an early breakout age. He's got some good upside, but I don't think he's that alpha that's going to come in and say, okay, this guy is going to be the wide receiver 1 in Detroit. Brashad Perryman had a decent year last year. There's another guy in Detroit I really like, Quintez Cephas. He had a couple good plays last year. He's someone I'll be targeting late. But yeah, Amon-Ra just kind of in that same boat of he has the opportunity laid out in front of him. It's just up to him whether he's going to go up and grab it. So a couple of those guys are some of the ones that I'm liking.
Yeah, I like Diami Brown. I think good spot for him in Washington just because who's their receivers really. But the problem with that is what's their quarterback situation moving forward here? Beyond Fitzpatrick for the season.
Well, they do have that quarterback last year who played really well against the Buccaneers. Played better than any of the other playoff quarterbacks. can't get his name on top of my head right now. I don't know
Taylor
why.
Heineke, yeah.
Taylor Heineke.
Taylor Heineke. There you go. So,
He thinks he's going to be the starter this year. I mean, I guess that's a good way to think about things.
He does think he's going to be the starter?
Yeah, well, he said I'm preparing to start, so we'll see. I mean, Fitzpatrick's going to have his good games. He's going to have his bad games. There won't be anything in between, Michael, for Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, true. Another guy, Josh Palmer, maybe. Not a guy I really know too much about, but when you look at this Los Angeles Chargers room, I talked about Jamison Crowder being a cap casualty. Mike Williams is in that same boat. He's due a lot of money, and they can cut him for little to nothing, so... And he's dealt with a ton of injuries. So if Mike Williams ends up being a casualty, then I don't have Henry anymore. Palmer could make a name for himself as well.
And, we got to talk about pretty much all the early picks in this class. Two, maybe more under the radar, but second-round picks nonetheless. Dwayne Eskridge for Seattle, which, obviously Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf are going to be occupying a lot of the receptions. But that third role could very well produce. We saw David Moore have some nice games over his time there in Seattle. What do you see for Eskridge in terms of fantasy outlook for, season one and then long term?
Yeah, I mean, fast guy. He seems like one of those utility guys that has that type of potential. He could be a returner as well. It's kind of a confusing pick by Seattle when you have so many other needs, like offensive line, corner, whatever it may be. But draft capital is there. Pete Carroll is going to do what Pete Carroll wants, and Eskridge is an intriguing prospect. So, yeah, I mean, I might take a flyer on Eskridge at the end of the draft. I don't think he's going to ever be anything consistent unless we have an injury to Lockett or DK Metcalf, which is, always possible. They did bring in Gerald Everett, who I think is going to be a factor as a tight end as well. So we'll have to see. But, yeah, Eskridge is someone I'm keeping an eye on.
And then the other player also in the NFC West, someone that really – dropped all the way down in my rankings after I got the weigh-in. There were still questions about his game, but once he came in around 145, I think was the weigh-in at first, I couldn't do it. But Sean McVay said, I'm not letting you get out of the second round, apparently, when he spoke to him in private. Tutu Atwell.
Gosh.
It's probably a long-term projection, but what do you see for Atwell if he is going to find success in the NFL? What type of role do you think that'll be in? And do you think it's a realistic expectation that he could potentially be a good player in the NFL?
Things move fast in the NFL, right? Tutu Atwell, you mentioned, very undersized guy, profiles as a slot receiver. That's Cooper Kupp's role right now. Cooper Kupp is a little older than a lot of people think. I believe he's approaching 28, 27, somewhere in that range. So, yeah, Cooper Kupp is a little older. I don't know when he's due a contract. I think he got signed pretty recently, but overall, in the next couple of years, the Rams could easily draft another guy to replace him. I'm not putting any investment into Tutu Atwell. I believe they drafted a wide receiver last year, also in the second round, which Van Jefferson. So who knows what's in store for him? Who knows what's in store for Tutu Atwell? I'm not a fan of Atwell. I'm not going to be putting any investment into him.
Yeah, it was a confusing selection. I thought that the room was fine. I thought there were other positions that certainly needed help. Los Angeles Rams, though, are definitely going to be an exciting offense. Stafford now in that offense with what has seemed to become an established Cam Akers backfield with some great talent behind him. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson, they're all going to be able to contribute. We've talked about it all offseason kind of, but what are your personal expectations of Matt Stafford in that McVay offense? Do you think he has potential to be a QB1 in fantasy? Do you think he has potential to be the QB1 in fantasy?
I don't think so. I mean, I love the player. I love the weapons. I love the situation with McVay. I think it's a million times more of an upgrade than it would be if he was in Detroit right now. But overall, I think Los Angeles still wants to lean on their run game. I think they still want to lean on Cam Akers. And the only thing with Jared Goff is when they needed to rely on their quarterback, he wouldn't always come through. Jared Goff would have his big moments, but for the most part, he's not a reliable guy. Matt Stafford is just kind of profiles as a reliable guy. So I think they're going to lean on Cam Akers. And if needed, Matt Stafford is going to come through and do his thing. He's going to have the weapons available to him to get the job done. But for fantasy, I'd profile him as like a low-end quarterback too, maybe like a just outside the top 10 for me. I'm not crazy about him because, like I said, I still think this is going to be a run-oriented offense.
And, we talked about the 2020 quarterbacks, but I think that 2020 running back room is definitely a very intriguing one, especially in a fantasy season like this, where maybe, there's like the top 5, top 6, and then really there's a notable drop off because a lot of those guys are sharing the backfield. How would you rank the running backs, of Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers, James Robinson, J.K. Dobbins? There's so many guys that are in this class that could be great running back ones in that first year. What are your thoughts on that group and really what you think they'll be able to do in the second year?
So Jonathan Taylor, he's going to be up there. He's going to be in that first round talent for me. He's still got a great line running behind. They just signed Eric Fisher today to play left tackle, coming off injury, but still nonetheless an upgrade from what they had with Anthony Costanzo retiring. So yeah, Jonathan Taylor is going to be up there for me. Next, it's going to boil down to Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift. I think Akers is going to get a little bit of a lead for me. Swift is going to be right behind him. He's going to have a ton of receiving opportunity, and Kerryon Johnson no longer there, so that backfield seems to be yours. And honestly, even if Swift does end up sharing that backfield with Williams, it's still going to be a significant upgrade to last year, to where Swift was averaging around 35-40% of the snaps. At the very least, Swift will probably be averaging 60 to 65, even with Jamal Williams back there. So it's going to be an upgrade for Swift nonetheless. Antonio Gibson, another guy I really, really like. Depending on how they want to use J.D. McKissick next year, I think if Gibson sees some more receiving work, he could easily profile as a top 10 fantasy wide running back. But as of right now, I'm going to have him a little lower than those guys just because he was a little touchdown dependent last year. Lastly, you mentioned J.K. Dobbins. Look, huge fan of Dobbins as a player. When I looked at the running backs last year, he was my number 1 running back in that class. But in Baltimore, it's not a great situation. Some people think he's primed for this running back 1 breakout season. I am just not on that boat. He's going to be sharing that backfield with Gus Edwards. Lamar Jackson's going to be taking away a lot of opportunities from him. He's not going to see any receiving work. He's very touchdown dependent. He's very big run, big play dependent. And that's fine for a running back 2, high upside running back 2, but I'm not going to trust him as a running back 1.
Yeah, I got to avoid too much results, too much opinion, because we got Jordan Trude here in the comment section, member of my fantasy league. So mostly going to be keeping my mouth shut now. I got to make sure that we don't reveal any strategies for this upcoming fantasy year. Just won it for the first time in my league's history. So trying to repeat as a champion. We talked about all these rookies that are going to be most likely, probably guys that have a lot better opportunity to succeed than last year's class. Do you think that there was anyone maybe that with this now hopefully much clearer opportunity of an offseason, much more in-person work, that we could see some pop-offs from this class? And I think one of the more notable positions that really production was just not there overall was the tight end spot. And I think the guy that I'm kind of looking at is Adam Troutman out of New Orleans. I think, he kind of established himself as a very talented tight end, but he really came on quite slowly because of, whether you want to say it's because of the offseason or maybe it was just a lack of talent class in that tight end class. But overall, is there anyone in mind that you kind of thought, oh, they're going to be good as long as they get in the right system? Maybe we're slow out the gates and, it's easy to see why with the season like last year that could potentially pop off in year 2.
So you mentioned Adam Troutman. He's one of my favorite tight end targets for this year. But it's really going to depend on if it's Taysom Hill or if it's Jameis Winston playing quarterback. And honestly, I wouldn't put it past Sean Payton for it to be both somehow. The first quarterback committee. So I really would not put that past Sean Payton at all. Throw Ian Book in there for good measure. But overall, I love Adam Troutman. He's in a great opportunity. They added no offensive threats for him. It's really just Troutman, Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith, and Alvin Kamara obviously in that backfield. So Adam Troutman's someone I love. Cole Kmet, I like the talent, especially with Justin Fields coming in. I think Cole Kmet could be that go-to guy between the tackles and third down looks. So yeah, I think Cole Kmet, he showed some upside. He had he strung together a couple games of 7 or 8 targets. And if they start using him in that way and steer clear of Jimmy Graham, then I think Cole Kmet might have a chance at some value as well.
Let me give you a guy that I think is going to have value at some point. Everyone's going to be scrambling to pick this guy up off the waiver wire just because of the fact that he will be a starter. And people don't realize this, but Davis Mills, Houston Texans, this guy is going to be playing a lot, as Michael and I discussed last week, perhaps week 1, starting quarterback. Your thoughts on him? I think he's in a good spot personally if he wants to be an NFL starting quarterback. And I think he's going to see the field before we see Lance or Fields or Jones.
It's possible. I mean, I think just like any team, Tyler Taylor is going to be Tyrod Taylored to where he gets the first couple games and he gets kicked off. I don't know how every single year Tyrod Taylor is in a position to start and then lose his job. I mean, there's got to be a record of how many times
his fault last year. I mean,
it wasn't his fault. But, Justin Herbert went out to have this historic rookie year, but it's got to be a record of how many times Tyrod Taylor has started and lost his job. That being said, I don't think Houston is married to Tyrod Taylor. I think they have no problem if Davis Mills shows up better than Taylor, that they'll put him in no matter what. If Watson doesn't play, which is what's being projected right now, Davis Mills is 100% going to get some playing time because, you got to see what you got. You got to see if you got anything in Davis Mills. You're not just going to let him sit on the bench for 17 games, no matter how good Tyrod Taylor is playing, unless Tyrod Taylor is playing at a level where you're in the playoffs, which is not going to happen. Then, Davis Mills is going to see some playing time.
Michael, what can we expect from Davis Mills at the NFL level as far as his playing style would be?
I'm going to be honest. I was kind of low on Davis Mills compared to a lot of people, but I think that there is plenty of intrigue when it comes to what he has in terms of potential, because a lot of people saw limited play time from him. There wasn't a lot of tape out there for people like me that didn't have, the connects to get all the all 22 of every game for Stanford. But what I was able to see, he's a quick passer. He moves very well. He's got nice drop back speed, and that's huge in the NFL. Setting yourself up to get comfortable, get quick to where you have more time to make decisions, especially as a young quarterback that's trying to process the NFL, that is going to 100% be more complicated than it is at that college level. That's going to be absolutely huge. There's questions in terms of how well he throws downfield. Some people think that he projects very well with arm strength. Some people think that, he's a good outside passer, but he still needs to develop a long way in terms of being a downfield passer. He's got the arm talent to potentially become something, though, and he's a quick mover. He's got some solid touch passing that I think is going to be really the reason why a lot of people are buying into the Davis Mills hype. And we've seen some throws on tape where he'll put it right over that first wave of defenders and below the second wave to where the receiver's able to get it, but also not get blown up by the oncoming secondary. And that's huge for a receiver. We saw some plays like that out of Justin Herbert as a prospect, and we see how well he was able to make that transition to the NFL. Now, the big thing, though, is Houston's a bad situation to be in right now for anyone, not just Davis Mills. Even if we saw, one of my favorite QBs in this class, maybe like Justin Fields, go to Houston, I'd be saying I'm extremely worried about what's going to happen for him, because the QB or the head coach seems like a coach that's probably just going to be let go after a year or two, and it's just kind of embracing the tank almost. The offensive line still has plenty of issues despite Laramie Tunsil being a very solid left tackle. The running back room is Mark Ingram, who should be able to contribute in some ways, probably get some nice touches. Philip Lindsay, who's going to be getting some receptions. But overall, the weapons are still questionable. And then, locker room plays a big part of that week-to-week situation. And a lot of people don't like the front office of the Houston Texans. And that's going to be very evident in this season. They've signed a lot of guys that are hopefully new guys that aren't going to have issues. But it's just a tough situation, and it's one that I'm probably going to try to steer clear of, even though I like Brandon Cooks, even though I like Mark Ingram, and those are guys that usually you can get late and get good value out of. And if they're there, then go ahead, take advantage. But at the same time, if you're looking to spend 15 on Mark Ingram in auction leagues or spend a 6th-round pick on him, I'm almost at that point where I'm saying I like Mark Ingram, but I'm out because I don't like the Texans for the season to be anything more than a bad team. And bad teams, as much as, you can get maybe a player that's consistent in terms of production, there's a lot of games where they're putting up 3 points and just no one's producing, and you're hating it from a fantasy perspective. So if you're looking
guys,
for...
and speaking of fantasy here, because you brought it up before, but Chad Kelly working out with the Packers this week. I don't know if you guys saw that. And Ben Kurt, who I never heard of, but I'm sure Michael has a full scouting report here. So the Packers, who only have Jordan Love on the roster, looking to bring in 2 additional QBs, which I think at this point you have to.
It seems they're playing hardball. I think this is a situation where Aaron Rodgers wants to be confirmed as a long-term Packer for life. And this is kind of his saying, like, look, if you're not going to sign me, then I'm fine leaving. And then the front office is trying to say, look, if you're fine leaving, we're okay with it too. And I expect this to end with an extension for Aaron Rodgers and then Jordan Love eventually getting traded, probably next offseason. But right now, I think this is just hardball on both sides, and we'll see what happens with it. But really, Kurt Benkert, Chad Kelly, 2 guys that have some talent in their arm strength and velocity on their balls. But overall, I don't think there's anything long-term starter about them. So Packers should definitely be very confident in Jordan Love if they're willing to let Aaron Rodgers
maybe a trade for Gardner Minshew.
Possibly.
That works.
Well, that's all we got for you guys here on Destination Draft Day. We want to thank Joe Volpe so much for joining us. Joe, let them know where they can find your analysis and insight on social medias.
Sure. So I'm mainly on Instagram. You can find me at fantasy.football.analyst on there. I also have a YouTube channel, Fantasy Football Analyst website, the FF Analyst. Anywhere you look up FF Analyst, I'll be. So
we appreciate everyone for watching, except for Jordan Schroed. We don't like you watching, getting my fantasy analysis.
Look, he's taking notes here. He wrote it down. He wrote Dokes round 15.
No.
He wrote it down.
I gotta go back to the drawing board. I gotta find some new strategies. But we thank everyone for checking us out. We thank LandryFootball.com for the platform. And again, thank you to Joe for joining us today on this episode. We'll see you guys on Friday. Have a good week, everyone.